Good morning to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for Tuesday, the second day of May 2017. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining me. We do have a lot to talk about today. Going to go over the latest in the SOI, the INSO state, some of the subsurface data, and the anomaly data has updated. And it's a fascinating look at that. I'm going to show you that as well. And then we're going to get into the actual sea surface temperatures out there, the Gulf and the Western Atlantic, plus the forecast from the CFS V2 from Levi Cowan's website, tropicaltidbits.com. A really interesting look at the precipitation anomaly forecast out to July. Has some interesting tracks, if you will. I'm going to show you that as well. And then kind of explain some really neat things that I've been doing the last couple of days, Sunday and Monday, here in eastern North Carolina, where my office is, in getting ready for the hurricane season ahead. So let's get rid of me and jump right in. First of all, a look at the Southern Oscillation Index, the SOI. We lost a few points here. April ended up at -6, so that's about a 9-point turnaround from March. And the 30-day is -6, so we're getting closer to a pressure pattern that sustains and maybe starts the chain reaction to a warm episode, what we call an El Nino. But we're not quite there yet. There are different pieces of the puzzle that typically must be in place to start the El Nino process and to keep it going. And the reverse, of course, is true with these numbers. If they're strongly positive, that you would get a La Nina, and we're certainly nowhere near that. So if we go in and we look at the sea surface temperature anomalies a month ago. So this is April the 3rd, and it's just a month ago. And I want you to look at a couple things here. The Eastern Pacific, quite a bit warmer than it should be back then, especially this Nino 1 and 2 region. Remember, the INSO state is divided up into different regions here, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. The other thing we noticed back in April was the cold anomalies in the main development region. And I think these two things here were a big, and in fact I know they are, a driving factor in Colorado State's forecast from Dr. Phil Klotzbach and his colleagues, calling for a slightly less than average hurricane season for the Atlantic Basin. You see these cold anomalies up through here as well, and then this potential spike of warmth growing in the Pacific. And, you know, that's the right call to make in April, more than likely. I can't argue with the reasoning, but let's go and look and see what has happened a month later. Isn't that remarkable? I mean, come on, that's pretty incredible. There's a month ago, and especially looking at the Eastern Atlantic, wow, the main development region has really warmed. Trade winds have been slower out this way. We haven't had these winds just blasting across the tropical Atlantic out here, mixing everything up. And so as a result, we've seen this increase in warm anomalies in the northeast Atlantic all the way down to the deep tropics. And then on the other hand, in the Pacific, we lost a lot of that heat content here in the Nino 1-2 region. And then you can even see this little snake of coolness trying to show up here close to neutral, maybe a quarter to a half a degree Celsius above the long-term average. Bottom line is it didn't keep on warming, and hey, there's even a couple of specks of cold showing up in there for what it's worth. Sort of cracks in the armor of this El Nino argument, if you will. And if we go further and look at the subsurface, this is even more intriguing, in my opinion anyway. You have this cold area in the subsurface lingering. And I'm not going to ignore this very large area of subsurface warmth, but the heart of it is fairly small. This, we're talking about an anomaly maybe 3 to 4 degrees Celsius above normal here, but it's more than 100 meters deep, and it's way out in the Western Pacific. And even if we get a westerly wind burst, because of the low SOI numbers, which sort of changes the pressure pattern, and then you can change the trade wind pattern with that. If you get a westerly wind burst going on out here, it's going to take this a couple of months to move its way eastward to be upwelled and then brought back to the west like we saw traditionally with a strong El Nino back in 2015. Bottom line is, I think the time is running out for there to be an El Nino of substantial quality to really knock the 2017 hurricane season down. That's my opinion, from what I'm seeing anyway. And to further my point, let's take a look at the Nino 3.4 region drawn in. Okay, I added this myself, and I want to show you, this is the region that's showing up as 0.5 Celsius above normal right now in the Climate Prediction Center weekly updates. They have buoys and satellite measurements, and they're showing that the Nino 3.4 area is sitting at 0.5 Celsius right now. Well, there is very limited subsurface warmth to sustain that. And then you've got this subsurface cold trying to sneak in. Again, I can't wait until we get more updates here. This is the 28th. Every several days, 5 to 7 days, sometimes 8 or 9, you get a new update on this map, on this graphic. And I can't wait to see the newest one as we get into May. So it's looking more and more likely to me that the El Nino is going to be weak at best, or worse, whichever way you want to call it, and maybe delayed in happening. So this is a very interesting change, especially when we talk about what we have seen right here with this very warm change in the main development region out in the Atlantic. All right, so we're going to keep an eye on that very closely moving forward, because after all, we're getting closer to hurricane season, right? In the Gulf of Mexico, actual sea surface temperatures as of today or yesterday, when was this updated? The 30th, so it's a couple of days old. Nevertheless, the 26 degrees Celsius line, which is roughly 79.5 Fahrenheit, the magic number, if you will, it's just a general, most tropical storms and hurricanes really do need that 80-degree Fahrenheit. But as we saw with Arlene, atmospheric conditions can change, and these are not, science has to be flexible. Laws of physics may be a little different, but in some areas of science there is certainly flexibility, and there are bends to the rule. But generally speaking, 79.5, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or 26 Celsius is what we look for. And so you can see a good deal of the Gulf now, almost half of it is warm enough to sustain development. And it won't be long, probably right before June 1st, pretty much the whole Gulf will be ready to go. And then, of course, as I mentioned often, we know that it's going to be warm enough in any year, usually, to sustain very intense hurricanes. So we always want to be prepared along the Gulf Coast. No question about that. I just think it's interesting to keep track of the temperatures and how they're progressing, especially for beachgoers out there and boating interests. In the western Atlantic, there are a few areas of 26 Celsius, little islands showing up, one there, maybe one there. The Gulf Stream running up through here, 25 Celsius. Shelf waters off the Carolinas and Georgia, gradually warming on up. But you folks in the mid-Atlantic states, up into New England, you need to be staying out of the water unless you like, cold water, probably until July. I can't imagine trying to go swimming in 50 and 60 degree water. I don't care what the air temperature is outside. That's just too cold for me. And the surfers out in California do it all the time in that cold Pacific water. But I digress. Let's get back to the task at hand here. So I want to show you this. This is real interesting. And before I get into it, I'll bring me back. So this is a neat graphic that Levi Cowan generates at tropicaltidbits.com. And what it's showing here is the precipitation anomaly in inches for the month of July, initialized just recently from the CFS V2, the Climate Forecast System, version 2, I guess you'd call it. And the green streaks that you're going to see on here, those represent above normal rainfall, and the neutral, the white color is, I guess, average. And then your browns or yellows, or whatever you want to call those colors, would be below normal precipitation or rainfall in this case. So get rid of me again, and let's take a look at what we have. Interesting, and this has already been drawn on here. I pulled this off of Storm 2K, and somebody's annotated it already, kind of highlighting what I want to show you. Look at these large areas of above normal precip rainfall, especially off the coast of southwest Africa here, south of the Cape Verde area, or Cabo Verde. And, is the CFS going to be right? I have no idea. But this is an interesting forecast that you would have all of this warm water. I mean, let's look at this. Let's dissect it for a second and try to figure it out. We know that right now, most of this area through here, the water temperatures are running above normal. All right. Now, if that holds through July, and we get an active tropical wave pattern, and the precip pattern over Africa here is above normal, especially right here off the coast, just south of Dakar and Senegal, all right? And then you got these streaks coming out, suggesting possibly tropical cyclone tracks. Now, this isn't going to be exact, so don't look at this and say, oh my goodness, they're aimed right at the United States. This is just giving you an idea of how this is run, that it's sniffing out an above normal pressure pattern, precip pattern, scratch that, precip pattern in the deep tropics, okay? And notice, and I think this is as equally important, some of these, originate in the deep tropics and head out, but we're not seeing dry down here, which would be all of this coloration, and then greens all up through here, indicating your development is taking place in the subtropics. So this tells me that we have a typical hurricane season shaping up for July with main development region development happening, if the CFS V2 is correct. So this is just a piece of the puzzle, okay, with something we need to pay attention to. This might be a hint. This certainly gets my attention, and the folks, amateurs and professionals alike, just your avid hurricane trackers at Storm 2K and other message boards and Facebook groups and the like, they keep an eye on these things too, because you got what I consider geniuses like Levi Cowan that can code this stuff and put it out there for us to look at and try to make sense of, and at least say, okay, that's very interesting. We'll see if this starts to come into play down the road. So as these get run, these models, I'll bring this up every once in a while and we'll take a look. I'm really curious to see what the Euro and the CFS show now that we've gotten into May, and when the European will get initialized and we get the public output on the 15th. I'm sure some of it will be sort of talked about from some of the agencies that paid the 6 figures or more to access it in almost real time. But between now and then, we'll keep an eye on things like this. So interesting to say the least, especially considering the sea surface temperature anomalies that I showed you. So all of this, as I said, we're getting closer to the season beginning, and it is time for us to get ready and make sure we're going to be at the top of our game to bring you the best coverage possible, not only from this end, the before part, but during and, of course, after. And my offices and my home are down here in the Wilmington area. And I worked with my colleague Carrie from Texas over the last couple of days. And what we did is we drove up the 17 corridor, got out on Highway 70 into Morehead City, and went all the way out towards Cedar Island. Then we backtracked and went on up through eastern North Carolina. Actually came up this way, out into the Outer Banks, down to not quite to Buxton, and did a lot of survey work and geotagging of bridges to place weather equipment upon if the situation arises. So humor me for a second here. Let's just think about it. You get a hurricane cutting through Onslow Bay here, for example. You're going to definitely want some instrumentation all around this area to the right of that track. A hurricane coming into Brunswick County, the same holds true in this area. And even tropical storms. We met with Emergency Management Director Drew Pearson. No, not from the Dallas Cowboys, but the Drew Pearson that runs Dare County Emergency Management. Met with him yesterday afternoon, and his concern is for storms that come in that seem rather innocuous, and maybe they strengthen or they don't weaken as much as they thought they would, and you can get some sound side storm surge flooding along the Outer Banks. And we saw that with Alex in 2004. We saw that with Hermine last year, and again with Matthew. In fact, with Matthew, take me away again here, he was telling me, and this is in the cyclone report as well from the Hurricane Center, that those north and northwest winds here coming as Matthew went by, and we had that front coming through and the extratropical transition and a lot of energy, there was 5 to 6 feet of inundation across this area. And that's above ground level, folks. So we want to be ready for that, my team and I. So we were working hard to scope out some locations for weather instruments, the anemometer and pressure sensors that we use. And this is very exciting to me, this is extremely important, nighttime. You think, oh, your cameras aren't going to work really well at night. Well, I disagree. While we can't get a wide, sweeping shot of some location, we can work with what we've got to at least show how high the water is getting. And of course, we've been using these markers for the better part of a year or two. These are our own little surge markers that we've come up with. There's our camera. We went to a house in Rodanthe on the Outer Banks. This is a friend of ours. These are the pilings, of course, that keep the house up, right? And you can drive your car onto here or whatever, unload for your family vacation. But for us, it is a laboratory. If a hurricane, if it's just a matter of when out here, comes in, and the surge comes in off the Pamlico Sound, that's usually where this flooding comes from, we figured we can mount the camera right here on the piling, put our marker on the opposite end of the driveway, and the light that you see is only from the headlights of my Chevy Tahoe. This is like 11 o'clock at night, all right? So it's pitch dark out there normally. And so we know that just a couple of well-placed LED lighting systems that are waterproof, and they make those now, they're inexpensive, that we can light this scene up, and at the very least, we can see the water coming in, and we can see it rising. And some of these hurricanes of the past have put water levels with high water marks. You know, some of these cases anywhere from 48 inches and getting close to 60 inches. Some of the watermarks in the back here of this family home documenting storms all the way back at least to Isabel. Okay, so this is very, very important, and this is the work that we do in the off season. This gives you an idea of what the perspective would look like from the camera. And so just imagine, if you will, and you have to, if you don't do this stuff now, you won't be ready for it. The water level's going to be coming up, and you're going to have debris going through, and the camera can see it all. And we'll anchor it down a lot better than we did just for this little photo opportunity. But this is going to be hugely important, and we can do it at night, and we can show people, the public, the media, emergency management, what is happening, even on this sort of small-scale shot here. We don't have to have that big sweeping shot like we had at Cedar Key or in Charleston for Matthew as an example. This will do the trick nicely, even if it's 3 o'clock in the morning when it makes landfall. I want to point out a couple things here before I end it. I told you there's going to be a lot to cover today. Water, we need it. Here's my Fiji water. Got to have it to survive. It's essential to life. But too much Fiji water, right, is not good for you. And the analogy here, what I'm trying to get at, we've had a tremendous amount of rainfall in the nation's midsection recently, and in eastern North Carolina as of late as well. Rivers got right back into flood stage, and the freshwater flooding issue from tropical cyclones, I'm going to be hammering on that a lot more this year, really highlighting the problems that people face after the storm has passed. It can dump all that rain on top of you, and you may have the groundwater start to come up and some couple inches of flooding in your home just from the excessive rainfall as it's happening. But those river floods, when it's all over, the sun comes out, man, that is a real problem. People are driving through that flood water still, and it just drives me crazy when I see that, because we got to be smarter than that, people, seriously. And especially when they're doing it with their kids or whatever. Oh, I just get it. It literally pains me because it's 100% preventable. There's no, what can we do to stop this? Is there a way that common sense would stop it? So look at this map here. This is amazing. This is the flood gauge map for the United States. And as I zoom in here, look at the nation's midsection, and all of these gauges, the purple ones there, are in major flood stage. And this is from a non-tropical system, of course. This is from the high moisture content in the atmosphere, the front that came through with that huge upper level low, and all the energy associated with it. squeezing out that moisture over parts of the Mississippi River Valley and its tributaries, the Missouri River and lots of other rivers, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri. A very tough time for those folks, but I want to use it as sort of a reminder and a lesson that we can get that in tropical cyclone events. Depressions, tropical storms, you think of Allison in 2001, down in Houston in that area. When we approach hurricane season, please keep that in mind, that rainfall, excessive amounts of rainfall, and the subsequent flooding, streams, rivers, creeks, etc., and then the river flooding as it spreads out afterwards really needs to be taken into consideration as part of the weapons that tropical cyclones have against us, all right? So I'm going to be talking about that a lot more, especially as we get an event approaching land later this, it'll happen later this season as it approaches. Alrighty, well that is it from me for today. As always, I do appreciate you tuning in. It's been an interesting off season. We've done some work in a couple of big storms, the nor'easters, continuing our testing. We got YouTube Live running. We tested that. I should have mentioned that. All throughout that drive that I did Sunday and Monday. Some of you may have tuned in for that. And we're going to be doing most of our streaming video from the vehicle. And when we can get out of the vehicle and do stuff, what we call our everywhere cam is going to be done on YouTube Live. So we're real excited about that. Going to be working more with Facebook Live coming up and really trying to utilize as much of the live video platforms from the social media, maybe even Periscope as well, and then continue to use our unmanned cameras, which are already set up and everything to run on Ustream. So we got a lot going on, that is for darn sure. Hurricane season is coming, all right? So be ready for it. Keep tuning in here for what I've got to say. But remember, I don't know everything, I really don't. So rely on the people that you trust to give you the information that can help you better understand what's happening. And I'm proud to be included in part of that package, all right? And if you haven't subscribed already on YouTube, go ahead and do so, and you will be alerted when there's a video or a live event happening. And I think that's it. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll talk to you early next week.